Okay, there's a lot happening here that I'm going to try to capture really succinctly because I love you. The author of the letter to the Hebrews, he's writing to, I want you to see the context here. He's writing to Jewish converts to Christianity in Jerusalem. And so throughout the entirety of the letter, he's taking not just general Judaism, the way the Gospel of Matthew will do, but intense liturgical Judaism that the Jews of Jerusalem, like the Catholics of the Vatican, would have intensely in their mind. And so one of the issues that he's addressing here is that Jesus is the true high priest, which for any Jew of Jerusalem would be very controversial because priesthood in Judaism was through lineage. And Jesus is not of the right Levitical lineage to be properly a priest. So how could you make that claim and say that Jesus is greater than even the high priest himself? And so what we're hearing about all this Melchizedek stuff is that the author is saying, actually there's another kind of priesthood that we accept in our Jewish heritage, and that is that of Melchizedek, who has no beginning and no end. And he's not saying he's not born and he lives forever. He's saying that even though, according to Mosaic practice, when a priest presents himself for the priesthood and serves his term, he has to demonstrate and prove his genealogy, that he's legitimately from the right tribe, and that we have a very clear term limit, and his term ends right here. Melchizedek never did that. He never demonstrated that he was from this tribe, nor was he from that tribe, because that tribe didn't exist. And yet our father Abraham, the saint of all saints that we love, tithed to him, which legitimized his priesthood. So we do accept a priesthood that is different. And in the same way, Jesus is truly high priest, and he's high priest in this way. And so that's the argument that he's making. Now, what does a priest do? The priest offers sacrifice as a mediator to bridge God's relationship with his people. So you see that particularly in the cross, like the vertical sense, because he's bridging humanity with divinity, but also in the horizontal sense, he's bridging humanity with itself, like he's reconciling relationships. This matters because this whole scene of the withering hand, which is one of the most skipped over perhaps passages, is exactly what Jesus is doing. He's showing that he is the restorer of all things. Why? In the Old Testament, there's only one person that's referenced to have had a withered hand. And it's the son of Solomon, Jeroboam, who ultimately with his withered hand divides the Davidic kingdom. So he ruptures God's own people into two different kingdoms, which is a huge violence to their identity as God's people, and is something that God promises he will reconcile and restore eventually. The other mention just generally of a withered hand, but not an individual, is in the Psalms, where the psalmist says, "If I forget you, Jerusalem, let my right hand wither." And so you see God's relationship, or God's people's relationship among themselves, as being scattered between the two kingdoms. And then forgetting Jerusalem is really to forget God, all their customs, their inheritance. It's sort of like it's the prodigal son scene. It's like to disown what you've received. So that's a ruptured relationship with God. When on the Sabbath, Jesus calls forward this man with the withered hand, and he says to the Pharisees, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath rather than to do evil, to save life rather than to destroy it?" He's saying, isn't the meaning of the Sabbath itself reconciliation and communion with God and with one another? And their hardness of heart is mind-blowing. And so when he heals the man with the withered hand, he's acting as high priest, the one who restores all relationships. And he's fulfilling God's people's anticipation of the day when the kingdom would be restored, when our relationships with each other, with God, like all of this would become reconciled. And he's going to fulfill that on the cross, but he's anticipating that with this man. It is not just a miraculous healing. It's a bold statement that they should have understood because they were expecting this. And because of their hardness of heart, they reject it, and then they go forward to plan his death. So what value does that have for us today other than just being scripturally fascinating? Is I would say, today particularly as the church and the nation is commemorating a great violence that happens in the scourge of abortion, where life itself is devalued. So we sort of get the Pharisees and the Herodians here with their hardness of heart, but also the pain that is inflicted, the ruptures that happen between mother and child, between mother in her own heart and her consciences. Depression and suicide rates go way up among those who have engaged and participated in an abortion. And then one's relationship with God, who has invited them into something beautiful, and then knowing that that has been rejected for various reasons, it does incredible harm. And the violence ripples out into so many layers that it can feel overwhelming. And we gather together before the one who can restore all of those things. Heal the withered hand of my heart. Heal the pain, the affliction, the violence that has been done among ourselves, among our relationship with God, so that the pain that this causes will cease, and what has been lost will be found, and what has been broken will be redeemed, as Lord, only you can do.